All right, thank you so much for joining. This is going to be our UCANR chart of accounts review, dedicated, geared more towards our administrative units. So in this training, we're going to be going over our chart of account segments, general ledger chart of accounts, or COAs, which include payroll projects and activity codes. We're going to be going over some PPM COAs. We're going to be going over our Segmentor and Finjector tools, and we're going to be going over some resources, or rather, I will point you in the direction to find the resources after this training. So this slide is going to be going over our chart of account segments and what each segment means. So our chart strings are long combinations of accounting information that are used to track expenses and revenue for each campus. Each segment contains a value that relates to a specific element of the chart of accounts, such as the fund or financial department. And then under here, we just have an example of one of our UCANR chart strings and kind of the structure that it's laid out. So our entity is 3310. Then you'll have your fund, financial department, natural account, purpose, program, project, and activity. And that is generally the layout of the chart string. So the first element of the chart string is going to be the entity. So this segment identifies a major organizational unit within the UC system. And for UCANR, that entity is always going to be 3310. So that will be a constant for UCANR. The next segment is our fund, and the fund segment identifies a funding resources, and these resources are the pots of money that are classified based on the designations and restriction types. The next segment is our financial department. So the financial department segment represents an academic or operating unit identified with an ongoing business objective aligned with UC Davis organization structure. So each county has a financial department, each admin unit has a financial department that will be unique to your unit. Next segment is the natural account. The natural account segment classifies the nature of the transaction as a specific type of revenue, expense, recharge, transfer, asset, liability, or net position. The natural account is going to change based on the type of expense or revenue. So that will be different in your chart string every time based on what you are doing. Next segment is the purpose, and the purpose segment is the functional classification of expenses for financial statements and other functional reporting. Next segment is the program. The program segment records revenue and expense transactions associated with a formal, ongoing, system-wide or cross-campus location, academic, or administrative activity that demonstrates UC Davis's mission of teaching, research, public service, and patient care. Next segment is the project. The project segment tracks financial activity for a body of work that often has a start and end date that spans across fiscal years. And then the final segment of the chart string is the activity. And the activity segment will track significant transactions which are recurring and take place at a point in time. So not every single chart string has every single segment filled out. Some of our chart strings are going to have just the default zeros for some of these segments. It just depends on the chart string that you're using. So using the correct COA or chart of accounts with its assigned segments, it ensures our ledgers are accurate, it makes it easier to track expenses and balances, and it supports better decision making throughout the year. If you ever have any questions about the correct COA to use, you should reach out to the BP or business partner or business manager of that financial department or your financial department. And then the full list of all of the administrative units and the correct BP or business manager can be found in the resources section. That is going to be just under these training recordings. You'll have access to all of the resources. So we're going to be going over some general ledger COAs. In our payroll, we have two projects, two GL projects. The first one is GL ANR PERMS, GLANR PERMS, and this is used for all permanent staff funded on general support funds. And just under that is going to be an example of what that chart string may look like. So we're always going to start with our 3310 entity. It comes from 19974 funds. Then it'll be your financial department, your natural account. 00, that is for the purpose. 000 is the default program. And then, of course, your GL project, GLANR PERMS, and then the default zeros for your activity code. The budget letter is going to reflect the accurate expense purpose. So that'll be different based on your budget letter. So right after the natural account, those 2 zeros, those are either going to be 44, 62, or 64. The next GL project is going to be GLANR TEMPS, TEMPS, and that is used for our temporary staff funded on general support funds. And then the example of a chart string for this type is going to be 3310. The fund is 19976. Then it'll be your financial department, your natural account. Then the purpose is going to be 62. You'll have a default 0 program value. And then, of course, the GL project number, GLANR temps. And then for the accurate activity code, that is what you'll get from your budget letter. All right, and the next general ledger chart of account is a salary savings account. The activity is going to be 202044. This is used only for salary and not applicable for benefits. And then it must also include the project GLANR PERMS, PERMS. And then again, this is just another example of that chart string, 3310, depends on the fund, then your financial department, natural account, default zeros for purpose, default zeros for program, and then your GL project number, GLANR PERMS, and then that activity code, 202044. So like I've mentioned before, the natural account is going to be varied based on the actual expense. Your budget allocations will be to 775BXX natural account, although this is not the natural account to use for expenses. This is just for budget allocations. And if you're not sure of the natural account, you can always leave it out of your chart string. So for example, you would put all the other elements of the chart string, and instead of typing in the numbers for the natural account, you can just write NATACC. So we know that's where the natural account goes. We're just not sure of that number, and that's no problem. So here are just some common natural accounts that you'll see. Salaries are going to be on 501000. Staff salaries and wages. Our general office supplies are 522201. Our outside purchase services are 530102. And other support services can be 770006. Those are common for our UCD recharges, like for cell phones and things like that. So this is talking a bit more about the purpose segment of the chart string. All expenses must go to a purpose. ANR only uses 44, that's for research, 62 for public service, or 64, and that's for operations maintenance of plant. Allocations and revenue can only post to 00. Everything else, all of your expenses must go to a purpose. You'll reference your budget letter for an actual expense purpose, and do not choose the purpose based on the purchase. That is what you'll find in your budget letter. So if a non-salary budget is split between two purposes, 44 or 62, then the expenses should be split 44 to 62. And here's an example of that for non-salary budget. You're going to split it into those two purposes. This is going over your activity code. So within your budget letter, your temporary funded positions will be assigned an activity code for each position. Some projects are funded by temporary funds. Those will also be assigned an activity code. One code is 200572. That's for annual building recharge. 200,504 are operational support funds. And please note here your $1,800 operational support, that would be the portion that you receive per temporary funded employee, is to be used to help cover the GAEL. That's the general automotive and employee liability. The 1,800 may not be enough to cover that, so you should not plan to spend those funds. And then here is just an example of temporary approvals for our current fiscal year 2025 to 26. So here are the commitments: Second Street building recharge, operational support adjustment, and then just going over those activity codes that are different based on therefore. Next, we're going to be going over our project portfolio management. And this is another type of chart string that you'll find, and that is referred to as the PPM. So there's the GL, which we just went over, and this will be the PPM, project portfolio management. So the types of funds that are managed in the PPM are going to be our academic salary cost recovery, our conference funds, income funds, gift funds, endowment funds, internal awards, and research and education funds. Something different about the PPM is that each project is assigned a task number, and that's what you're seeing here after our different types of funds. Academic salary cost recovery is going to be ACR 024 or ACR 025. One difference that we may be going over later is that the academic salary cost recovery for the 2025-2026 fiscal year, those are going to be now managed in the GL. But from 2023 to 2024, and then last fiscal year, 24 to 25, those are still in the PPM. And until those funds are used, they will still be managed in the PPM. Just going forward after this fiscal year, 2025 and 2026 are moving to the GL. And then afterwards, you're going to see your conference, income, gift. These numbers afterwards are your tasks. So CNF 001 for conference, INC 001 for income, and so forth. Your faculty and department projects in the PPM. So all A&R advisors and CE specialists have a faculty project. We're going to be going over the naming structure of the faculty projects. So it's going to be your FP, stands for faculty project, your organization plus the 4-digit hire date. So for example, for Alameda County, you'll have FP, ALAM, and 1001. That would be for new faculty, John Smith, starting in Alameda County on October 1st, for example. And then counties and statewide programs and institutes have a department project. So naming structure of the department projects is going to be similar. So instead of FP, you'll have DEP for department, then your org, and then 001. For example, for Humboldt, we have DEP, HUMB 001. The next one, DEP, IPMP 001, then DEP, IGIS 001. So it's important that you know your organizational code. It'll help you find your chart strings faster. So here's an example of PPM faculty project task structure. So FP SUTY 6114, and all of these task numbers. So we have academic salary cost recovery from 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. And then we also have a gift account, GFT 001, an internal award, IAW 001, and a research and education account, RED 001. And this is just one example. So you have the project, the expenditure organization, and the expense type varies, and then your task. And that is the structure of a chart string for a PPM chart of accounts. Here's another example for a department project. This is for DEP Lake 001, This is for Lake County. Of course, the expense type varies. And for example, gift 005. So we've got two conference accounts, CNF 001, and two, an endowment, END 001, several gift accounts, 1 through 10, one internal award, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not sure where 5 is, but we have several income accounts, and then one research and education account. That's just an example of what tasks go with that project, that department project. So some resources that you're going to be using, so the UCANR Aggie Enterprise Portal. The GL chart string is always going to be represented in the following format, which we already went over. Entity, fund, financial department, natural account, which will vary, purpose, program, project, and activity. And the PPM chart string is always represented in the following format. It is also called the POET abbreviation of a PPM chart string. That would be your project, expenditure organization, which is the same thing as your financial department, the expense type, and the task. So just to note, entity is the constant value at 3310 for UCANR. Expenditure org is the financial department where project expenses are expensed. And expense type is the natural account. I'm going to be going over some tools that we have to help us manage and look up these chart strings, Segmentor and Finjector. Both of these can be found on the UCANR Aggie Enterprise webpage, and if you'll be needing to access chart of accounts frequently, I do recommend that you bookmark both the Finjector tool and the Segmentor tool. So Segmentor tool is developed to facilitate the creation and the validation of common chart of account chart strings, which then can be entered into Aggie Enterprise and other related boundary applications. This tool does operate independently from Aggie Enterprise, but the values and validation rules used by Segmentor are the same as those in Aggie Enterprise. So you can look up GL chart strings and PPM chart strings in Segmentor, and this is just an example of what Segmentor looks like. So the first picture here is a general ledger chart string lookup, and you can start typing any segment of the chart strings here to fill in the full chart string. This is an example of a PPM chart string lookup, and for this you can start typing in the project, and the other task should fill in, or the other element should fill in, and then you can select the task. Another example is if you don't know your financial department number, you can just start typing in the name of your financial department and the number should pop up. So for example, they've typed in ALAM to look up for Alameda County, and then it'll pop up right under there. You can see that that financial department number or expenditure org number is 9923211. Some examples of when you look up a chart string and it is valid, you'll type in all of the required fields on the left here for the general ledger chart string. You'll click validate chart string, and you can see by the two green check marks on either side of that chart string, it is a valid chart string. An example on the right-hand side of an invalid chart string in the GL. So you've typed in all of the fields here, you hit validate chart string, and you get an error, and it'll usually tell you what the error is. And in this case, they typed in 50 for purpose. The GL segment 50 for purpose does not exist, so that is why this chart string is not valid. Here's an example of a PPM chart string that is valid or invalid. The first one here, valid UC Path PPM. You can look it up both in the PPM Poet tab or the UC Path PPM tab. So you can type in all the elements here and of course hit validate. And with the green check marks, you can see that it's valid. And then on the invalid side, all of the elements of the chart string looks like they are correct, but it did not validate. And it says because the task income 001 on today's date is not within the task start and completion dates. So that means this PPM project and task is expired. So that is another reason that your chart string may not validate in Segmentor. Another tool to help you organize your department's Aggie Enterprise chart strings is Finjector. And this is a manual process. The chart strings are placed within a folder by the fiscal officer labeled either GL or PPM. The GL chart strings are going to show up in that yellow gold color, and the PPM chart strings are going to show up in the blue color. That's one easy way to tell them apart. And folders are grouped by teams, and each has a list of users and permissions. So if you need access or you can't find an account you need, just reach out to your BOC team and we'll make sure that you have access to the folders that you need for your department. There is one folder per county in the UCCE counties. There's one folder per advisor, and there's one folder per CE specialist. There's one folder per program or institute for statewide programs, and there's one folder per admin unit. Here's an example of what Finjector looks like at your homepage. You may not have access to all of these folders that are showing up here, only access to what you need to do your job. If you're missing access, again, reach out to your BOC team and we'll make sure you get the access that you need. And this is, again, just an example of that homepage with the different types of teams. If you go into one of the teams and click on one of the chart strings, this is what comes up for a PPM chart string. This is going to have that full chart string and tell you what each segment of the chart string is and the name of it. It'll tell you the project manager and the project start and end date. So on this slide, we do have some links for some resources. We have our UC ANR Aggie Enterprise website, distribution report feedback, COA or chart of account, enterprise structure, Aggie Enterprise sign-in, resources on our homepage, guidelines for chart of account segment naming convention, and then our help desk support. Thank you so much for attending this training. If you have any further questions, please reach out to your BOC team, and our resource links are going to be right below this training for you to access anytime you need it. Thanks so much.